Okay. All right. If I think we should get started. I want to thank everybody for staying for this late in the afternoon, and we're in such a beautiful province. I know it's very tempting. Um, so I want to present to you today a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and such an obsession for me that my friends at school are tired of hearing about it. So I thought I'll come here and talk to you guys. So my name is Leslie St. Jacques, and right now I'm a PhD student. And I have to say that this summer has been one of the best summers of my life. And I'm going to show you some of the reasons why. And hopefully you will also, if you're not already into sailing, that you probably want to do it after this. So this presentation is about learning to sail, but it's also about learning to start a new role. And that might be as a new graduate, that might be as a PA who's changing your specialty or the hospital that you're at. And it's also relevant to those of you who are more experienced, who are teaching, and who will be supporting other PAs as they start in their practices, in your practice, to work alongside you. So I don't have any conflicts of interest to disclose for this presentation. So this is the ideal that I've had in mind my whole life when I was thinking, like, I can't wait to learn how to sail. I really, really wanted to do it for a very long time. And something stopped me. I actually was only thinking about keel boats, which are the gigantic ones that have the big, basically a great big piece that goes down under the water. It's massive, and it's the kind you see people wearing business shirts, standing with a steering wheel on the top of the boat. That's not what this is like. But this is also pretty hard. And this is the ideal that happened at the end of the summer. This is what we thought that we would be getting into early on, and not quite how it went. So this presentation is really about how to smooth the waters in those early days for the new novice physician assistant coming into a new setting, and what we might need to think about when we're onboarding PAs. And I know now that we have so many new PA programs, we're going to have so many more students, we're going to have lots of new colleagues. So this will be important to think about if you're a manager or a supervisor and you're bringing people into the organization. There's obviously a lot of literature about residents and the transition to residency. Residents have it really hard. They have a lot to learn. They're under a lot of pressure, and they're worried about how they look to other people. They know that this is a massive, steep learning curve. There's almost no information about PAs who are also in the very same position as a brand new resident. And worse than that, PAs don't have any kind of well, in my experience, maybe this is different in other provinces, and I hope it is, and I hope it will be. But what do new PAs going into a new role have to support them in that? Do people understand what we need, and do people have something set up for us already? In my experience, no. And every job that I've had to help people figure out what a PA is, what we can do, and what do I need in order to learn it and to be part of the team. So obviously there's a lot of literature about residents, and a lot of it says that residents are at very high risk of burnout. They're super stressed, and the stress on the job creates also medical error. It makes difficulties with job satisfaction, and sometimes I think for PAs it's about retention. So there's a lot of difficulties when you're starting something new. And I don't know about you, but when I first looked at all these ropes, which aren't even all called ropes, they all have different names. And the people that I was taking the course with, we were all like, oh my, how are we ever going to learn this? So the very first time you're there, you do the lesson on the land, and somebody's got to show you through it. So it just all looked like a gigantic mess, like a bowl of spaghetti. Who knows what goes where, what it's for, what it's doing there. And so you soon find out that there's a lot to learn. And you have to start Googling stuff. And no matter how many times people show you how to do a bowline, you're not going to remember. It's really tricky, and you're going to need a lot more help. So what you need is some salt. You need an old salt, but not this kind of salt, obviously. You need this kind of old salt. You need somebody who knows what they're doing. You need somebody who can tell you about sailing in general, somebody who would actually know what the big sailing races are, somebody who has been in the water upside down. They're not even worried about capsizing anymore. Somebody like this. And so hopefully this is what the team that we're going into has, some old salts on it. And maybe some of those old salts are actually going to be all of us in this room who are already acclimatized to our role, and we're going to be helping people through it. So this is obviously the step-by-step of how to do a bowline. And I can tell you that, like, I was so grateful that I had my camera with me and I was taking pictures of the hands of this old salt as he went through this, because not just me, but every other person in my class couldn't figure it out the next time, and we all had to look at pictures again. So unfortunately, when I started out as a PA in 2010, I graduated and went into critical care. And they didn't really know, well, it was in the first class of grads from McMaster. Nobody really knew what we were going to need. And most people didn't know what we were. And I had to explain to everybody what a PA is. And in some ways, it was sink or swim. And hopefully this isn't going to happen to the new grads coming out now, that we have an idea of what everybody's going to need. A couple years later, I went on to neurosurgery, and it was the exact same thing, sink or swim. But luckily for me, in the middle of these two positions, I had gone to Winnipeg, where everything already was figured out in a lot of ways. There were actually other PAs on the team already. I wasn't just the only one. And that experience was so healing because people were able to welcome me in. So the waters were really smoothed for me by the other three PAs who were in that service. But they were also smoothed for me because I had a really fabulous supervisor, and that's Neil Barrington, who maybe some of you know because he's a neurosurgeon in Winnipeg. And I can't understate this enough that people need to know what we need, and sometimes we don't need to, we don't know. So there's got to be a way of figuring this out. Part of the problem, I think, is the pre-boarding. So when I first graduated, the physicians who were hiring me, they thought okay, we're going to have some meetings on the units. We're going to talk with the nurses about a PA who's coming, and this is critical care. So there's already a feeling there that you don't go to work in critical care in those days. You don't go to work in critical care unless you're a very experienced person. So that's like the first problem against bringing on a novice PA into that environment. So there was already a story about who gets to work in critical care. And what they did was they tried to have meetings with the nurses and other staff before I got there. And I think what happened was sort of like a town hall where sometimes people would talk about why they don't like PAs, why they don't think PAs are useful here, and why an NP would be better. So obviously this is a problematic beginning, and not the way that we would like things to go nowadays. And nowadays, because of the human resources crisis in healthcare, actually a lot of people working in ICUs are novice. And so people are starting to get around that idea that there are a lot of new nurses that are coming into ICU, that we have to figure out how are we going to help these people to get up to speed as fast as possible and as safely as possible. So this is something that a lot of centers are already thinking about for other professions, and they could be thinking about it for us as well. So recently, I've been talking to some places about starting new roles for PAs, and I've heard it more than once. And I don't know if this is a management speak, because I'm not an MBA or anything, but I've heard it more than once, the term socialize. We're going to socialize this role. That's not the kind of socialization that I was thinking of, but I think what they mean is they're going to start talking about it. They're going to offer an opportunity for people to ask questions informally, not in the town hall, why do we want a PA, or actually, why don't we want a PA kind of town hall, but to be able to allow an opportunity for people to just hear about it. We're thinking about a PA. This is what it might mean. Do you have any questions? In an informal way that really helps with the pre-boarding of the PA. So if your management team already believes in PAs and they're able to clearly describe what are all the benefits for the team, for the resident team, for the physician team, then you're already way ahead of the game when you decide to take your PA through the first tour. So another big aspect about successfully onboarding PAs is what do the people who are already there think is their role in terms of helping the person learn their new job? So, unlike residents, we're not going into it with a really prescribed documents of what we need to learn in a hurry. We're going into it without a roadmap at all, and we need to count on our staff and the resident team or other PAs that work there to help us figure out, like, what am I doing here, and how am I going to do it? Sometimes, I think, in my experience, the physicians don't realize that their job is also to support you and mentor you. And so if they don't really know that that's something they're supposed to be doing, it creates a little bit of an issue when people need help. So if you've already told the people who are working there that we're bringing this person on, they don't know everything about our department. Even if they're an experienced PA, they don't probably know how this specific department runs. Then we're going to need to be there to support them with that. So entrustment is a term that you've heard about a couple of times already in workshops or lectures this conference. Entrustment refers to the gradual earning of the trust of the people who are assessing you. So in the school context, we have entrustable professional activities that people are going to graduate with. So we've seen the list that's already out there for what the EPA PAs are and what we're supposed to know when we graduate. The process doesn't end at graduation, though, and entrustment continues to happen when we're in our new positions, because our physicians need to know that we know what we're doing in order to give us the autonomy to do the role that they hired us for. So that's not going to happen on day one unless you're 20 years in the same role in a different setting maybe. This is going to happen gradually over time as they see what we can do and they start to trust that we know what we're doing. So this requires on our part a ton of learning. It also requires on their part a ton of training and supporting us, and the workplace-based assessments that they're going to be doing on us are in order to give us directives or give us the direction that we need or sign our supervisory agreement, whatever that takes in terms of our growing autonomy in different provinces. They need to know that we know enough to be able to be unleashed and to have more and more autonomy gradually over time. There's other parts of the entrustment process, though, which relate to their guidance of us in learning what we need to learn. So at first, we're going to have some reasonable limits placed on us. And hopefully, we're going to have a whole lot of coaching. So I think I mentioned in my presentation earlier about dialogue and the importance of dialogue. So if you have a really good open communication with the people who are working with you, whether they're your students or your new PA, if somebody doesn't understand something, it's not a big deal because you're going to talk about it. You're going to talk through it. You're going to get the guidance that you need. And hopefully they're going to be thinking in terms of, you are still a learner, and we're going to talk about this until we have the same understanding as much as possible. But it also entails creating really positive relationships and a real good connection between yourself and your supervisor, and also your fellow colleagues who might be in different roles. There's a real role for interprofessional teaching, and as we know, a lot of us have learned how to do art lines from RTs. A lot of us learn also a lot from physiotherapists. There's tons of stuff that you're learning from different members of the team as well. So having a good relationship with your coworkers all through the hospital is important, or wherever you're working in the different disciplines. This also prevents the kind of trauma that comes from feeling abandoned by your staff or your team, where you're kind of left to sink or swim. You don't really know who to call for certain things. Maybe you have a situation where you're sort of abandoned. There's a sense of helplessness. Sometimes stuff hits the fan and there's nobody around to help you, which can lead to overwhelm and burnout. And one of the key things that I saw this summer is I took the courses that are the first level course for sailing twice. The first time I took it, it was really great. It was early spring. There was a ton of people who were super eager, as well as I was, that were eager enough to sign up in really cold weather to start sailing early in the season. And if you don't feel confident enough in the water, you don't pass. You keep going. So I didn't pass the first time. I was very hesitant because also it was freezing cold. I didn't want to end up swimming, and I was very cautious as a new sailor, super cautious. So they read that as, okay, you're not confident enough to pass. So that's fine. I came back. I did it again, and the next time it was really, really, really windy. And the people who came to take the class with me, a whole new set of students, they didn't quite understand. This was not like a keel boat. I can't wear my top starters. I probably shouldn't be wearing a business suit. And also the amount of wind was wicked. I can't even describe. So this is not the day that was windy, obviously. It's like this was an intentional capsize in the course to be able to practice capsizing and get it back over. But on the first day of the second cohort, people were capsizing all over the place, and they were in boats with an old salt. So they pair you with an old salt and the brand new student, and even with all the old salts there, everywhere you turn, boats were upside down. So this is your first day. This is your first day in the water. So of course, people came off of the water that day saying, I can't come back. I can't come back here. This is not what I signed up for. This is not at all what I expected. And also I don't feel safe. The old salt that was with me really, like, they pushed it too hard. They didn't protect me. Well, you know, if you get thrown into a new clinical environment and you don't have the supports that you need, how does that feel? I think it feels very similar to the people who happen to come on a very, very windy day for their very first time on the water. So the importance of somebody being with you for when stuff goes wrong is super important to be able to come back. So sometimes the conditions just aren't right for somebody who's new to handle things on your own. So if you were an old salt and there's no wind at all, you know some things that you can do. There's some tricks that you've learned about how to get the boat moving, how to get wind in the sails by rocking the boat, things like that. That in this the picture here of the sailboats, this is like a day with absolutely no wind, where your only choice was to row. If you were brand new, the only choice is to row. You don't, like, what else are you going to do? And it ended up that the rowboat, which is where the instructors are in case something goes wrong, they had to tie ropes between all of these boats and bring them back in because there was no wind to sail. The other thing I want to talk about here is adaptive expertise. So I don't know if this is something that people have heard a lot about, but in terms of medical education, you want people to become experts, but you also want them to become experts who can handle stuff that's unexpected. And so if you have in mind that you can study as much as you want, but when you get out there and you find out that there's equipment missing, or something goes so wrong that you couldn't have imagined, but you can still figure out what to do, because you know the end game, you know where you want to get to, you know the thing that needs to happen for this patient to be safe. And so you can start to think creatively about, oh, how am I going to make that happen? And that's when you go from being maybe an expert to a real expert who can MacGyver stuff. And so that's why I put his picture here, because MacGyvering is not ideal in medicine, but sometimes it happens. Stuff happens that you didn't expect. You're missing equipment. You're missing parts of your team members. Things go wrong. And so if you're able to MacGyver the situation and figure out a way through it, this is what is adaptive expertise. Learning how to take a situation that you weren't expecting and improvise and figure out what needs to happen. So this is my classmates at the end of the summer, my classmates from the first cohort in our baby duck regatta. And you can tell, like, these are people who are fearless. They're fearless. They're not worried at all, except you can see that there's still a bumper on the front of the boat. It's just, it's not because they need it, but because it's the baby duck regatta. So you needed to have it by the rules of the race. But these people are clearly able to take some chances to really push it and to go as fast as they can in the boat, and knowing if you capsize, they know what to do. And of course, there's some rewards along the way. That we just passed the baby duck level. There's still tons of ways to go, but we can still be grateful for the experience that we have, and knowing that we've made it through. So at this point, I wanted to be able to ask other people, what do you think about the situation that we currently have with a lot of novice staff, not just PAs, but also the lot of new nursing staff, and every year we see new residents. In your experience, what do you think a PA needs when you leave school in order to do a great job, and what kind of supports do we need? Now, that's my first question for you guys. And is there any experience that people would like to share about the situation that you were in when you were thrust into the last new position that you took on? No judgment. We won't judge you. Don't worry. Yeah. Yes, actually, yes, I did. Yeah, I was very lucky. I don't know if I can see the one that I picked there, but yeah, it was fun. I don't think your mic is on though, Becky.
Oh, I don't. It's just too tall for me.
Okay.
And what I wanted to say is that one of my concerns about newer graduates or PAs starting new positions is working with mentors who are quite burnt out and a bit disheartened in the system. Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of preceptors come to me right now saying, I don't know what to do. All these programs are expanding, not just PA programs, but undergraduate medical programs, residency programs. And now I have 4 or 5 students at a time, and patients are getting sicker and there's fewer access. How do you, and so they're coming saying, I don't know how to manage that. And so I do worry for people who are starting new positions or newer graduates being mentored by somebody who's already at the bottom, because we can't pull from a bucket that's empty.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a really good point. So I think one of the things I might have glossed over is when we're asking the supervisors to help us come up to speed with what they're looking for in terms of their new staff, somehow for them to be able to supervise and mentor us and assess us, do all these workplace-based assessments and teaching, somehow the organization has to have made time for that. Because otherwise, you're just at the bottom of the list, which might include like applying for research grants and flying around the world, giving presentations other places. Like somehow that supervisor needs to have time to be able to help us, to be there for us. So I would say definitely it's an organizational question and it's one of those things that are going to help somewhere there's got to be extra help to bring the new people on in order to mentor them. And speaking of that, actually, Becky, I'm talking with some ICU nurses lately. The phenomenon of having 90% of your nurses on the shift with you being new is really stressful for the old salts that work in the ICU, because they know, like, in the next bed beside, what's happening in that room. Like, normally I would be in there. Normally the nurses would have several shifts with multiple people helping them learn. And so that is a stress on the older staff, because the staff who are more experienced know what it took for them to learn, and they know what the other person needs who might not be getting it right now. So that's a really good question. And maybe I could ask people at other centers, has there been a solution that you have seen where you work that has been implemented to help with this onslaught of all new people coming in?
I'm not sure how helpful this comment will be, but I'll give it a try. My first job out of graduation, I was thrown in, just no training whatsoever. They were like, here's a pager, here's a list, go for it. But my current position, I was brought on. They said, we're not going to take any residents, we're not going to take any medical students until you feel comfortable here. I went through kind of a formal curriculum online with modules and assigned reading and everything else. I was slowly stepped into all of my patient encounters where it's like, okay, you've done this, that was great, now try this. And I have to say that was fantastic, but it was so odd. I felt like I'm doing nothing. I'm walking into this job. I expected to hit the ground running, get that pager, go see patients, but it was very much the opposite situation, which I think was really good for my learning, but also just so bizarre after the first experience. So I hope that comment's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and in between the times when you're not grabbing the pager and running to see the patient, you're probably thinking about what I need to read. Like, this gives you some time to absorb what exactly it is that you need to learn. So actually, in terms of like moving from Winnipeg back to Ontario and being in a hospital in Ontario that didn't have directives set up, it was really super helpful to have known what the job was in Winnipeg. And then I could come back and put that into the format of medical directives to be able to share it and say, well, this is what we were doing in Winnipeg. Is this what you want me to do here? And be able to have a format there. And I think one of the things that have been helpful to other departments with is turning my own directives into something more general and being able to have that ready for the new PA who comes to whatever department, so that they've got something to work with. So, and one of my colleagues created a really great onboarding form of all the things that she needed to learn in her department, which down to like categories of medical issues that she needed to know how to manage and procedures, and then created that for her department, who then hired more PAs, and then it was a good template to start with.
So sorry to hear about these stories that people go through where there's meetings talking about how they don't like you. Maybe just a happier story. So where I started a year and a half ago, they had a PA previously, so they knew what a PA did, and I feel very welcomed by the team. Healthcare is a disaster in Manitoba, I'm sure elsewhere as well. And so the executives will come to our ward sometimes and they'll meet with the nurses. And the nurses have told them that the PA on the ward is the best thing that's happened to their ward in a long time. One of our charge nurses is now moved to a clinical educator role, and she brings in regularly like groups of little baby nursing students. And I'm introduced to them right from the beginning. So I feel very welcomed where I am, and I think that is to thank good supervisors and good staff and the PAs that have come before us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Kelly. That's a great point. And having that introduction from somebody who's already there is really helpful, and the support that you get there. Mhm. Any other thoughts about what this situation was like for you as you were starting your first role?
So we had a bit of a good situation in Winnipeg, kind of good for the profession writ large, that it's a busy clinic, but the PA that was there ahead of us was phenomenal. Everybody had amazing things to say about him. He was effectively working completely the goal of working unsupervised, doing everything that he needed to do. But when myself and our other new PA got there was that expectation that we were going to just jump in and kind of fill his shoes, which wasn't the case. So good for the profession, but it just took a bit of a kind of massaging with everybody else in the clinic to just remind them that we're kind of new at this. Just give us a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. If you have had someone who's a rock star come before you, it's really hard, such as Aaron giving a presentation right before mine. So yeah, I mean, it's really hard to fill the shoes sometimes of somebody who's so amazing that what do you do? But everybody's a learner at some point, and hopefully that's a message that the staff, that the supervisors and the management are giving, is that eventually this new person is going to be really, really experienced and able to help. So, oh, sure.
Okay, I've had a range of experience with both good and bad, and definitely more sink and swim than anything else. But I think that would be nice, which I've never had, is like having a mentor that maybe is not your supervising physician, but maybe like works within the department somewhere else, but actually checks in on you like every 6 months or so, and like kind of put goals together and like ways that you can grow, and not just like initially like onboarding and then check in 3 months and then that's it. It would be nice to like have that continuous like mentorship.
Yeah, yeah, it would. Yeah, or maybe it doesn't have to be somebody at your center either. If we have connections with people in other places who are doing a similar role. Does anyone have any advice that they would give to the management or the supervisors who are going to be taking on the new PA? Is that my phone, Becky? It's because I put the alarm on and I forgot to bring it up here, so I don't talk too long. Go ahead.
Well, I really liked the story that you shared about somebody after they started and got comfortable actually put together some organizational perspective to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what that brings me to is that I'm a really big advocate of altering our contracts to include administrative time. And I recognize that that is not always a possibility to include in contracts, and there's a lot of resistance to that. But with some dedicated time, things like that can happen, because I think very evidently we have a very small group of people in this profession, and you don't survive in this profession unless you're quite dedicated and a trailblazer. So I think people here want to do those things, and I love hearing those stories, and it would be great if we are advocating for that. So my recommendation to administrative staff and people who are putting together these jobs is that we absolutely require administrative time.
Definitely. Good point. So if there's no other comments, I just want to thank you so much for staying to the end of my presentation and for all the excellent questions. Thank you.